You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. As you're probably well aware, these are the first four lines of the chorus of The Gambler, a song written by Don Schlitz in the mid-1970s and popularized by country music legend Kenny Rogers as the title track of his 1978 album, The Gambler, with the song even winning him a Grammy in 1980. Billy Walters is a real-life gambler, and while he would likely acknowledge the truth in the simple lessons in this song, it took this Kentucky boy who came from abject poverty, winning and losing hundreds of millions over his life, decades of substance abuse, near-death experiences, broken relationships, and the right relationship to become one of the most renowned sports gamblers of all time, as well as becoming a highly successful real estate developer, investor, and philanthropist. And he's just written a phenomenal book about his life titled Gambler: Secrets from a Life at Risk. Billy, thank you so much for the time. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Trey. Thank you.
So this book was entertaining. It was compelling. It was heartfelt. There are so many lessons to be found in this life story that you're telling about yourself, Billy. And a lot of people assume that you might be writing this story and sharing this book because you have some scores to settle. But you claim early on that that's not the case. So why did you decide to write this book?
I initially started writing the book in 2003 and then changed my mind, decided I wasn't going to write a book. And then there were a number of things that took place in my life that I never thought would ever take place. I ended up going to federal prison. I walked into federal prison when I was 71 years old. Then there were some things that happened while I was in federal prison that confirmed the fact that I had to write a book. I had to tell my story. I mentored 24 men while I was in prison. That really opened my eyes to a lot of different things that I hadn't been exposed to. My daughter committed suicide while I was in prison. That was the final thing that took place that cemented the fact that I had to write this book.
Your story is one that early on finds you in unique circumstances. You're born into complete poverty in small town Kentucky in 1947. On top of that, your dad dies when you're around 18 months old. And your mother, who was a teen mom before MTV made it cool to be a teen mom, was more focused on chasing her own vices over raising in your two sisters. You and your older sisters were each entrusted to extended family after your mom ran off. For you, that meant staying with your grandmother, Lucy Quisenberry. Why is she one of the two most important women in your life?
Trey, I could have had four parents and I couldn't have had a better role model than Lucy Questenberry. I mean, she taught me, the most important things to me in my life, and they're still the most important things to me today. And, that's mutual respect for others. That's, work ethic. First words, she taught me were yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. I was raised up in a Baptist church. My entire social life from the time I can remember I was going to Sunday school on Sunday morning, church afterwards, training union on Sunday night, prayer meeting on Wednesday night. And I went to a Christian youth organization on Saturday night. My grandmother worked two jobs. She was a very proud lady. She didn't take any assistance from anyone, she just wouldn't do that. So I couldn't have had a better role model than her.
You were exposed to the hustler's life at an early age, having spent many a day and night in your childhood at your Uncle Harry's pool hall, which you admit provided many life lessons that church could not provide. Like what?
Well, what happened when I was 4 years old, my grandmother was working two jobs. We didn't have a daycare center. I was born and raised in a small town in central Kentucky, 1,400 people. So there was only one place she could take me, and that was to my uncle's pool room. So my uncle, when I was 4 years old, he just went back to the back pool table and gave me a pool stick. He put up two wooden Coca-Cola cases, which I stood on top of, and he went back to work, and I started banging pool balls when I was 4 years old. And by the time I was six in the first grade, I was racking balls in there and playing penny and nine ball. I was playing a pool game. It's called nine ball. I was playing for a penny a game. So my life was, you know, I'm in church every time the door's open, and I'm in a pool room working for my uncle and playing pool. So that was essentially my formative years. And I'm 77 years old today, and that's kind of what I am today. So.
You're 77 today, and you have to go back nearly 70 years for the first sports bet you ever made. What was that first sports bet you made around the age of 9?
My heroes were the New York Yankees, Whitey Ford, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, and Casey Stengel. And I had a neighbor. His name was Elwood Branstetter, and his father and they were avid Brooklyn Dodger fans. And so the Yankees had beat the Dodgers in every World Series they played them in. And then the final World Series they played them in New York. I had a paper out. My grandmother, I was just so sure that the Yankees were going to win the World Series. Elwood's father, Woody Branstetter, he had a grocery store and a meat market there in the little small town I was from. So I bet him the entire $125 that the Yankees would beat the Brooklyn Dodgers in the World Series. Of course, Mickey Mantle was hurt for that series. He didn't play, and that was the only series that the Brooklyn Dodgers ever beat the New York Yankees. I lost my 2 years savings that I'd earned, with a paper route. It was the most devastating loss I've ever taken. I could lose $25 million today, and it wouldn't probably hurt as much as that $125 did when I was 9 years old.
I mean, $125 is a lot of money. I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old right now. $125 is a lot of money to my 9-year-old in 2023. You take inflation into account, $125 had to have felt like a million to you back then.
Well, it did, especially I'd worked two years with a paper route. I had a morning paper route and an afternoon paper route, and I got up every morning. And I'm in a small rural town in Kentucky, so it's not like these houses are right next door to each other. I'm riding a bicycle, probably at least 10 miles in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, delivering papers. Saturday, I'm going to each place and collecting for the papers, and so it was 2 years of hard-earned money, and I lost every penny of it. Along with the paper route, I cut grass, I shined shoes. I did a lot of things to save up this $125. I was just sure the New York Yankees could, that they weren't going to lose. I mean, and what I learned then and what I know now, there are no sure things in life.
No, definitely not in the world of sports.
No.
Now, your grandmother, for as important as she was and still is for you, she died when you were around 14 or 15 years old. Just how hard was that for you?
It was the most difficult thing I've ever faced in my life. I thought essentially my life as I knew it at that time was over because she was my entire life. I mean, again, as you noted, she was my mother, she was my father, she was the siblings that I didn't have, and she was the person who had raised me as far back as I can remember. And she taught me everything that I knew. She took me to church. She taught me business. She took me to this small country bank, Hart County Deposit Bank, when I was actually 7 years old. And she'd already made it up with a banker, but I wanted to buy a power lawnmower to cut grass with. And she took me in there and she took me up to the banker and we sat down and we went through this mock deal. I didn't know it was a mock deal at the time, but her, the banker, already had it made up. The bank let me $40 to buy a Huffy power lawnmower with, and my grandmother co-signed the note. And so she taught me that at a very early age. And then she took me back to the same bank when I was 9 years old, and she had co-signed my note for $90 to get the morning and afternoon paper routes. So she taught me business. She taught me, work ethic. She taught me respect. She just taught me so many things. And so 15 years old, I mean, I'm born and raised in a small rural town of 1,400 people. As you can imagine, losing her was my life at the time. I thought, well, I mean, she was my whole world.
You had to do a lot of growing up really fast as a kid and as a teenager and even as a young adult as well. Like at 16, you end up getting married and becoming a dad for the very first time. By 19, you were divorced and getting married for a second time, eventually ending up with 3 total kids with these 2 women, both of whom you divorced before too long. Now, while you worked your butt off to provide for your wives and kids, you admit to being more married to the gambler's life at this point in time. At what point did you realize the lesson that you talked about in this book about recognizing that time is far more valuable than any amount of money that you could provide for your family for the sake of their present and future?
When I was 17 years old the first time,
Excuse me.
and the rest of the ages are correct. And My grandmother was gone, and I'm not making any excuses, but my mother had been an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic, and I was susceptible, didn't realize it at the time, but I had an issue with alcohol. And I was still growing up. I mean, I was a kid when I got married at 17 years old. Of course, I had a daughter and had responsibility, and I had two jobs. I worked at a bakery in the morning, and I went to school during the day, and I worked at a service station from 3 to 11 at night to support my family. First marriage was, I married a girl that had a very similar background to myself. She was raised by a grandmother, and the other thing we had in common, we were two young kids with raging hormones, and next thing you know, we have a child. So that marriage lasted no time. You're right, I got remarried again right away. That marriage actually lasted 9 years. But that entire period of time that I went through, I had this issue. I didn't realize it at the time because I didn't drink that often, but when I drank, I would get hammered, and when I drank, my personality changed. I did all kinds of stupid things. I became abrasive. I would gamble. I would do things that sober I would normally never do. It was almost like I was on a suicide mission. I
Mm.
made a lot of money in the business. I mean, back in the 70s, I was making $600,000 a year in the automobile business. And even in the 60s, when I first went in the automobile business, I made one year $56,000 selling cars. But the bottom line was all the money that I made, my family lived well, but I never accumulated a penny. I lost every nickel I had gambling. And the only time I lost gambling is when I drank. And then of course I worked at a car lot. I worked there from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. And many nights I would go to a bar. And next thing you know, I'm playing poker all night, and I'd be rolling home at 6 o'clock in the morning, take a shower and put on a suit and go back to work. That went on for a period of time. And in my second marriage, my eldest son, when he was 7 years old, was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. That was the most difficult thing I've definitely, undoubtedly, I've ever gone through. We were told by the doctors he only had 30 days to live. I'd been running a business for a number of years, had been very successful, but really had no capital. I'd operated on other people's money, so to speak. And then what happened is when he was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, I went through a lot of self-blame. I hadn't spent as much time with him as I should have. It was the only thing in my life I'd ever faced I really couldn't do anything about.
Mm.
And next thing you knew, I wasn't focused on my business. I was drinking. I lost my business. I went bankrupt. I got a divorce. I was really on rock bottom. And I met my wife today, whom I'd met earlier. I'd met her like 3 years earlier, 4 years earlier. Well, actually, earlier than that, what am I saying? But I met her through her parents and her brother. I just met her briefly. I was at her parents' house one night. She was in high school, and I was only 3 years older, but I looked like I was 30 years older, probably. And then later on, when these things happened, I got a divorce. I ran into her brother, who was a good friend of mine, and I asked him, how's Susan doing? He said, well, she's doing fine. And she'd gotten a divorce also. So we got together, and best thing that ever happened to me in my life, there's just no question about it, is I married Susan Walters. We've been married now 47 years. And the good news about it is when we got married is I was on rock bottom. It couldn't have gotten any worse for me. And she knew who I was. There was no surprises. I mean, she'd known me for a number of years. She knew I was a gambler. And her father, who had been an executive at Philip Morris Tobacco Company, he was a small bettor. He would bet on the basketball games and things like that, the high school basketball tournament in Kentucky. And, gambling in Kentucky is kind of a way of life anyway.
Mm.
But as soon as I got married, like I said, I was on rock bottom. I mean, I just gotten a divorce. I just gone bankrupt. I lost my business. And there wasn't any place to go but up, so to speak. And then, like I said, we've been married for 47 years, and undoubtedly that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
I'm going to put a pin in your relationship with Susan because I do want to talk a little bit more about that. But I did want to ask you a couple of other things about the late 60s and early 1970s. Now, as you admitted, you started selling cars in Louisville at around the age of 19, and you proved to be really good at it really quickly. You set records at multiple dealerships, eventually owned your own business as well. What was it that clicked for you right away that allowed you to be so good at this?
Well, I realized in a hurry, the whole key to selling cars was staying busy 100% of the time.
Hmm.
And I also realized if you didn't really work at it, that there was going to be a lot of lax time and it was just going to be, time was going to be wasted. Because typically, if you're selling cars, people come in and when they're there, you're busy, you're waiting on them, you're showing them a car, you're trying to sell a car, you're doing whatever you're doing. When they leave, back in those days, they were waiting for someone else to come in. Well, I realized that very early on, the whole key was staying busy all the time. So if I wasn't busy with a customer, I would be in on the phone and I would just, I'd pick up the phone and phone book and I would get the prefix of the area that our business is located in. And I would just start cold calling people. If I sold someone a car, back in those days, there was a crisscross directory. And the crisscross directory, it would show you everyone that lived on the same street as the address you put in. So I put in the address of people whom I sold the car to, and everyone on that street, I would send them a postcard, introduce myself, and say, "Did you see Mr. and Mrs. So and so's new car? We're running a sale," and I would invite them to come down. Everyone I sold the car to, my goal was to turn them into a referral source. And
Hmm.
I paid them a referral fee, and I paid a higher referral fee than anyone else in Louisville did. I would also, the people who referred business to me, like Thanksgiving, I would send them a turkey. Everyone who I sold a car to, I sent a Christmas card to. And then back in those days, in the Courier Journal, every day there were cars in there that people had listed for sale, take over payments. Well, bottom line was what they were telling you, they couldn't afford the car anymore, but they still needed a car. So I would call those people up. I would have them to come in. I would take their car in and sell them a less expensive car. It was the same transaction. So that's what I did. So if I wasn't busy with someone on the lot, I was busy on the phone, cold calling people. I was busy, sending out cards, follow up with people whom I sold cars to, their neighbors. I was calling referral sources. I stayed busy the entire time. And then what happened after I was there for like 5, 6 months, I mean, I was selling 20 cars a month just on referrals. People were referring business to me. Bottom line is I treated people the way they wanted to be treated. So when they referred someone, they felt good about it. On top of that, they were being compensated.
I think that's just a good general rule of life too, is always staying busy. We're at a point in time now where everybody's looking for that excuse to take that break, but it's I guess that hustler's mentality that kept you from ever feeling comfortable just being completely bored while you were supposed to be getting paid at work.
Well, luckily, Trey, my entire life I've done things that I really enjoy doing. I love doing it. When I was in the car business, I'm still in the automobile business today. But I love the automobile business. I love everything about it. We could talk about the automobile business for the rest of our interview because it's something new every day. It's different every day. It's challenging. It's like running multiple businesses. It's very interesting to me, fulfilling. And I really enjoy selling someone a car and making them and their families happy. So to me, it really wasn't work. I was able to do something I had a lot of fun doing.
So you went to Vegas, I believe, for the very first time in the spring of 1968 with your second wife, Carol. What was that like?
Well, it was really we went American Express back in those days. They had trips. If you bought the American Express traveler checks, you would get these trips. You would go like they had a trip. You went to Vegas for like 3 days, then you went to Honolulu for like 3 or 4 days. And so I bought one of these trips, and we went to Vegas. We stayed at Caesar's Palace. Caesar's Palace had just opened, and we'd taken the money with us for our vacation. And sure enough, before we'd been there no time, I ended up losing all the money that we had gambling at Caesar's Palace. So when we went to Hawaii, what money we had was what money that Carol had with her that she had in her purse. So we spent the last half of the vacation in Hawaii on Waikiki Beach with very little money. So it was a memorable trip, but not in the way you like to remember one.
Another memorable experience from around this time is the first of a handful of near-death experiences. What was this first near-death experience at a Louisville area Holiday Inn.
Somebody when I got robbed?
I think this was the time that you were hanging out in a hotel room with some colleagues.
Oh, you're talking about in Indianapolis.
Oh, yes, I said Louisville. Yeah, my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
apologies.
Okay. That's the reason I was kind of confused. I went to an automobile auction in Indianapolis, Indiana. And after the sale was over, a lot of the car dealers, we went and rented a room at a Holiday Inn and we were playing poker. We ordered some food from room service. And when room service delivered the food, or we thought it was room service, we opened the door. Two or three masked men come in with guns drawn and robbed us all. They put us on the floor, and of course, back during that period of time, I smoked, and I probably drank, I don't know, 12, 14 beers, close to a case of beer before they came in. Matter of fact, I just got up. I was getting ready to go to the bathroom, and that's when they came in the door with the guns drawn, put us on the floor, robbed us all, and of course, I was about half drunk, and I'm mouthing off the guy, and the guy said, "Look, I'll blow your goddamn brains out." And he pulled that trigger back, stuck it next to my head. Of course, that sobered me up pretty quick. Anyway, and then they finally left, but before they left, I couldn't get to the bathroom, and I disposed of most of that beer because I'd been laying on the floor too long. So anyway, that's the one you're talking about. Yeah, that's pretty good, I guess, when you got more than one. That when somebody asks you a question about life-threatening experience, and you got more than one. So that's the one that happened when I went to the dealers Indianapolis auto auction for a car auction. A bunch of car dealers got together. We'd actually been doing that every week, so I guess too many people knew about it, and somebody had told somebody and they were waiting on us.
Let's get back to your relationship with Susan now. As you said, it is the most important moment in your life. Why was Susan the beginning of a better you?
Yeah, well, again, Susan knew me. She knew everything that there was about me, good, bad, and different. And she knew I drank. She knew I gambled. And Susan never tried to change me, not once in her life. And regardless of whatever happened, good or bad, she just understood that's what happened. That's the life of a gambler. And as a result, we've had the greatest marriage that two people could ever have. I understand people who get married and maybe they think one of them thinks they know the other, and the other changes after they're married, and they get mad, disappointed, and they no longer want to be married to that person. But that wasn't the case. But Susan knew everything that there was about me. So in our life, in the 47 years, the things that we've been through, whether it be gambling or whether it be indictments or whether it be going to prison, Susan, she knows everything that there is to know about me, and we probably have the closest relationship that two married people could have. And we have a real marriage, and a real marriage to me is, you're there for each other. I'm there for her, she's there for me, and there's no questions asked. It's kind of, and we both kind of laugh about it because I was in prison for 31 months, and Susan visited me there 3 times a week. She was there for every visitation. She was the first or second person every morning to be there. The visitation didn't start till 8 o'clock. A lot of mornings she was out there at 4:30 or 5 o'clock to be the first. And a lot of our friends will say, "Well, boy, you must be a saint." I mean, I can't imagine, and she laughs, and we kind of look at each other. I mean, I would hate to be in a relationship to where if she did to me or I needed her, that one of us wouldn't be there. I mean, that's just the way, I guess, the way we were both born and raised. And maybe, I don't know, but I'd hate to be in a relationship to where if I had a problem that came up, that my partner wouldn't be there to support me. But luckily for me, I've got greatest wife in the world, and we're there for each other, whatever it is.
Yeah, and that loyalty was tested pretty early on after y'all got married. Now, I'm speaking to you from Austin, Texas. I would be remiss not to ask about your Guy Clark story. So, how was this relationship tested? And thanks in part to Texas music legend Guy Clark.
Well, we had a nightclub in Louisville. It was called Butch Cassidy's, and there's a place in Nashville. It's called the Exit Inn. It's a very famous place. Back in those days, all of the recording artists. They came into Nashville. They did their recording, and when they left, they went on the road. And they either had their buses or whatever they had, and they went in different directions. And the guy that ran the Exit was a guy named Owsley Manier. But we had a nightclub in Louisville called Butch Cassidy's. And a lot of those acts that would leave would come through Louisville. We would sign them for one night. Well, Billy Joe Shaver was coming through Louisville, so we signed Billy Joe Shaver. We actually signed Billy Joe for a week. And Billy Joe came in, and he had Guy Clark with him. Hell, everything was great. And I think the second or third night, Guy Clark, myself, and a couple of band members, maybe three of the band members, we went to another joint. We went to a place called the Dewdrop Inn. And we were drinking, and next thing you know, we started pitching nickels at a wall, and we were betting $100 a pitch, whoever got the closest to the wall. So this went on for a period of time, and we were both drinking pretty heavy, and we got in an argument over one of the pitches about who was the closest to the wall. And next thing you know, Guy Clark hit me. And when he hit me, he and I got in a fight, and we were duking it out. And all at once, one of those band members took a beer bottle and hit me right across my nose.
Oof.
And when I got hit with that beer bottle, next thing I know, I was on the floor, and they were doing a little bit of a toe dance on me. So I got outside the bar, and I got underneath a car, and they left. So I had a suede jacket on, I never will forget. So finally I go home. It's about, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I knock on the door. I lost my keys. Susan come to the door, and she closed the door. She didn't recognize me. My nose was so deformed, and there was so much blood on me. And then she opened the door. She said, "Oh my God!" So anyway, I came in, and I went over to Suburban Hospital, and they couldn't do anything with my nose because it was cut so bad. They went in and they cleaned my nose up, put ice on it, and I had to wait for the swelling to go down. And then I don't know, 2 or 3 days later, I went in and they operated on my nose. But anyway, it was that's what it was.
I feel like I need to go through Guy Clark's catalog and see if he wrote a song shortly after that described the experience. He's such a good storyteller through music, after all.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I'm in the hospital, so the guys that work for me, one of my partners, they went up the next day, and Billy Joe's their stay was cut short. Let's put it that way.
So in 1978, new Louisville mayor Bill Stansbury went on a crusade to clean up illegal bookmaking. So why did you decide to get into the business as a full-time bookmaker in the middle of all of this?
Well, I've been in the automobile business for 16 years, and basically everything I'd made working, I lost gambling. I had guys that couldn't read or write that were driving Cadillacs, and they worked the car lot every Monday morning to get paid. So I knew I was every bit as smart as them, and could outwork, all of them. And back in those days, gambling was basically throughout the South. It was in Louisville and Hot Springs, Little Rock, Nashville, Knoxville, Atlanta, Birmingham, Mobile. People bet on sports, people gambled, and there was no organized crime. And in Louisville, it was real simple. As long as you didn't muscle anybody that owed you any money, the police didn't care if you gambled. And there were card games. And then what happened when Bill Stansbury decided to run for mayor, it said he was going to clean up the illegal bookmaking in Louisville. Well, I just started booking, and so I moved out to a different county. I got completely out of that county because he said what he was going to do. I believed him. First year, I think they arrested, I don't know, 15, 16 bookmakers. And I'm sitting out in this other county. I'm thinking, well, I'm smart. And anyway, well, the next year, the very first Sunday of pro football, very first Sunday, 22 Kentucky State policemen and a couple Louisville Vice Squad guys, they kicked the door down, and they came in and arrested me and 5 other guys for bookmaking. That's when I had to make a decision whether I was going to stay in Kentucky, get out of the gambling business, or move someplace where I could be in the gambling business and do it legally and lawfully and be a part of the community and be understood by the community. And that's when Susan and I decided to move to Las Vegas, which was the second best decision I ever made in my life.
And that was in September of 1982. What was Vegas like back then? Obviously, we know what Vegas is like now, the place that what happens there stays there. But what was early 80s Vegas like for you?
Early 80s Vegas was way, way better than it is today, as far from my perspective. There were things about it that weren't as good. In early 80s, there was still a lot of organized crime there, and that wasn't good. Everything else about Vegas was much better. I mean, smaller, wasn't as much traffic, it was much safer. You didn't have nearly the crime that you have in Las Vegas today. The hotels, the shows, everything, nothing was nearly as crowded as it is. It was just entirely different. But when I moved there, it was, you know, Trey, the main thing about moving to Las Vegas, see, back in those days, people looked, if you were a gambler, a sports bettor or a bookmaker, most people didn't understand the difference. Most people thought you were involved with organized crime. And then most people thought, well, you're some kind of a crook or degenerate or something. People were just kind of ignorant about understanding people who gamble. Well, when I moved to Las Vegas, I moved to the gaming capital of the world. I was surrounded by, by people such as myself. They weren't ignorant about gambling. So I moved to a city that, I could be a respected member of the community. I could do the things you do in any community, but yet I could succeed at my craft. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, early on, there were issues there with organized crime that you had to work around, and that wasn't good. And as I told the story in the book, I had an encounter there, and I had to deal with that. But once that was over, I couldn't have lived in a better city in the United States than Las Vegas. I feel that way today. I mean, it's is as appealing to me as it was then? Absolutely not, because it's gotten too big. There's so many things about Vegas today that I really don't like. But I moved to Las Vegas, Trey, in 1982. I was broke. I was $200,000 in debt. So everything that I have accomplished business-wise and financially, I went to Las Vegas, and I'll never forget it. So, we've been involved with that community, and we'll continue to be involved with that community as long as we're alive, and deeply involved, whether it be various charities or civically or whatever it is.
You make sure to give credit and thanks to a lot of people who helped you out early on in y'all's time in Vegas. That includes guys like Lester Ben Binion, the casino owner and Vegas insider, and then also Chip Reese, who was your friend on top of being one of the best poker players on the planet back then. What did he teach you about money management that sticks with you to this day?
Yeah, Trey, when I moved to Las Vegas, I'll describe myself to you. I was a real dangerous gambler. When I was sober, I wasn't drinking. I knew what I was doing. But the other thing that made me dangerous is I would bet it all. I really, I don't know why. I can't tell you why, but I never had any fear of getting broke. But when I moved to Las Vegas, problem was I still was drinking, and I wasn't a good money manager. I mean, if I lost my money, I was going to try to chase it down until I got it even. Either I broke you or you broke me, regardless of whether I had the best of it or not. And then Chip was actually my second partner. My first partner is kind of funny, was Doyle Brunson. So I go there, and Doyle's my partner, and we're going to bet sports. And back in those days, most people, and still today, most people, they don't think there's any way you can win betting on 30 ball games a week. They think it's impossible. So Doyle agreed to be my partner when I first went there and our partnership was he put up all the money and I did the handicapping, and we were going to split things 50-50. And this was in 1982. We had a really bad week. We lost $1 million. And I thought Doyle was going to, I thought he was going to, I thought he was going to hang himself. He was livid. And the guy that actually sent me to Doyle, Billy Baxter, Doyle called Billy Baxter up, cussed him out. He said, "You ain't never done a goddamn thing good for me in your life." And Billy told him, he said, "Well, Doyle," said, "I'm just not that smart." So the next week, we bet on 30 games again, and we won all of our money back. We're like 225,000 winner. So Doyle said, "I can't take this anymore." And so Doyle quit. And when he quit, I had to have a new financial partner. So Chip was my new financial partner. Chip's background, he was from Dayton, Ohio. He'd gone to Dartmouth. He was on his way to Stanford Law School. He stopped in Las Vegas to play in a poker tournament, and he never left. Really, really. Best all-around poker player in the world at the time. And a great money manager. And in order to live in Las Vegas and be successful, you must be a good money manager. So Chip's putting up all the money. I had no choice. I had to do what Chip wanted to do. So we had a money management system. We followed the money management system. And so that was one of the greatest lessons that I learned, was working with Chip and learning how to manage money. You take the personal element out of it, and the bottom line is it's a business, nothing more than a business. You run it like a business, and you don't let your personal emotions dictate whether you're going to make a bigger bet or a smaller bet or make a bet at all. It's strictly all driven by business.
What was the computer group, Billy?
When I was in Kentucky, when I started booking, is when I originally got introduced to the computer group. And there was a guy, his name was Michael Kent. And Michael Kent was from the Pittsburgh area. And Michael had worked for Westinghouse. He was working along with others in the development of a nuclear submarine. And he was playing in a softball league, an intramural softball league. And it interested him. So he decided he was going to write a computer software program to handicap the intramural softball league. That's how it all began. And he took that program and decided, he saw it was successful and decided he was going to use it to bet sports. So he went to Las Vegas to bet sports. Guy knew a lot about programming, computers, but knew nothing about gambling. So you can imagine what he ran into in Las Vegas. And he ultimately got introduced to a guy who basically, not a good guy, but he didn't know it. He got introduced by a mutual friend to a guy, Ivan Mendelin, who was going to help him make these bets. And Ivan Mendelin hooked up with a couple of bookmakers in New York, a guy named Jimmy Everett and a guy named Stanley Thompson, that he actually owed money to that he couldn't pay. And he told them that he had this software program that, that he was confident would be successful. And so they agreed to move the money for him. If whatever money he won, he would take a portion of it to repay them the money that he owed them. And that's how it all began. And then the guys in New York, it was very successful. I mean, I think the first day they made like 20 bets, they won 18 out of the first 20. So the more successful it became, the more they wanted to bet. And then that's when he started going outside of New York City. And then the guy from Pittsburgh actually started calling me, and he was betting me. I was booking. I was handicapping at the time too. But unlike Mike Kent, I didn't have a computer. I had a pencil piece of paper. So it didn't take me any time to see this was sharp action. So I started taking it and getting rid of it and going with it. And then they approached me and wanted to know if I would move money for them, because I actually had a bigger market than they had. I had all the bookmakers in the South, and I had quite a few bookmakers on the West Coast that I could bet. So I agreed to start moving money for them when I was in Kentucky. And then when I got arrested in Kentucky and I went to Las Vegas, I decided that bookmaking was over. There wouldn't be any more bookmaking because I didn't want to have any more problems with authorities. So I moved to Las Vegas, and I became full-time involved with them and moving their money. I wasn't part of their group at the time. And they would give me an order. I would bet the amount of money they wanted to bet. I would bet whatever I wanted to bet. And I would turn the rest back into them. I worked with them that way for probably 2 years. And then there was a raid that took place in February of '85 by the FBI of the computer group. And they thought it was an organized group of bookmakers instead of bettors. And they thought everyone was involved with organized crime, which no one was. But they conducted a raid throughout the United States of 13, 14 places, confiscated a bunch of records, monies. And then finally, in 1990, 2 weeks before the statute of limitations were to run out, we were indicted and charged not with being bookmakers or not with anything else. We were charged with being part of a criminal conspiracy to bet. Now imagine this, Trey, in Las Vegas, Nevada, the gaming capital of the world. In 1990, we were charged with being part of a criminal conspiracy conspiring to bet. So that's how I got involved in computer group. Once that case, it all started in the early 80s, the computer group broke up, so to speak. And Mike Kent and I partnered up, and there was no one involved but Mike and myself from 1985, 1986 until Mike retired.
Yeah, sad number of examples of law enforcement trying to come after you for doing something illegal, even though everything you're doing is above board, because you always made it a point to do things above board. But ultimately, even with trumped up / bogus charges, they were able to get you several years ago. We'll certainly talk about that here in just a little bit. First, though, how did you make a sworn enemy out of Steve Wynn with the spin of a wheel?
Well, I was playing poker at the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas, and a couple guys approached me, and they had this idea that they could beat roulette wheels. They were explaining to me about biased roulette wheels, and they were looking for someone to put up a bankroll, and they were going to play roulette, and whatever money they won, they would split it with me. Well, I knew the guys, they were a couple con men, so I said, well, thanks, but no thanks. But it did interest me, so I went and bought a roulette wheel, and I disassembled a roulette wheel. And what I realized was a roulette wheel it's like an automobile, like an airplane. It's made up of mechanical parts, and if they weren't maintained properly, or they got worn, you weren't going to have a bias in a roulette wheel. So what I did, I started going to collect numbers on roulette wheels. I would get like 3,000 numbers, and then I had a software program, a little computer program that we written, and we would run those 3,000 numbers to see if there was a bias. And what I learned was, Trey, almost every roulette wheel has a bias, okay? But finding one that has enough of a bias to be able to overcome the house odds, that's the whole key. So if I saw one that looked like it could have that big of a bias, I would go back and I'd get like 27,000 more numbers. Then I would run a computer program on 30,000 numbers to try to get a stronger indication whether there was a bias there or not. And then the wheels that I identified that I felt like had a bias, I would play those wheels. Now, there are two kinds of roulette wheels. There's what we call a French wheel, which has 1 0, and then there's an American wheel that has 2 zeros. Well, any kind of a big player, the casinos in the US, they will bar one of the zeros. They will, if it lands on one of the zeros, it's no bet, you spin it over. And even with the 1 0, the house has enormous, the odds are still enormous in their favor. Well, I found a wheel first at the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas. I was playing poker there in the poker room. Matter of fact, I was playing poker with Steve. And I saw a wheel there that I thought I could beat. And I told Chip and I told Doyle both about this. And I said, you guys want to partner up and do this? And I thought they were going to laugh me completely out of the Golden Nugget. They both started laughing so hard. They said, well, everybody in the world's tried to do this. And I said, well, this is different. I bought the wheel myself. I disassembled it, and I had Mike to write me a computer program, and I ran numbers, and these wheels are biased. Well, so anyway, I went and played the roulette wheel at the Golden Nugget, and the first time I played it, I've been playing for about 8 hours, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm down to my last $50,000. I thought, well, boy, you big idiot. Anyway, the numbers started hitting, and I finally won my money back, and I won a small amount of money. You know, I played for, I don't know, 20 some hours the first time. But I'm playing poker with Steve, you know, almost every night, and then we're playing golf at the Las Vegas Country Club. Well, I started getting numbers in other casinos, and I started getting numbers in Lake Tahoe. I started getting numbers in Atlantic City, and I went to the Super Bowl of Poker in Lake Tahoe in 1986. It was Amarillo Slim's. Basically, it's a tournament of champions. It was a tournament after the World Series. While I was there, I ran the numbers on the roulette wheel there at Caesars in Tahoe, and I saw it was a good wheel too. Well, after the tournament was over, I went back and I won $2 million there playing roulette. And then I ran some numbers on some hotels in Atlantic City. And the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City, there were a couple of roulette wheels there that I thought I could beat. So I'm playing golf with Steve one day at the country club, and I drove him back home. He lived in the Scotch 80s, and we made a game. I was going to put up $1 million. I had to put up $1 million. I could bet $1,000 to a number, and but I had to put up $1 million. So I chartered a plane, and Susan and I flew to Atlantic City. I put $1 million in the cage, and I went over to play the roulette wheel. And I asked Boone Wason, the guy running the casino at the time, I said, which one of these zeros are you going to bar? He said, well, we can't bar any zero in Atlantic City. It's against the law. I said, that's impossible. I made the game with Steve Wynn. He owns a hotel. Well, Billy, you know, said, Steve probably didn't understand the New Jersey gaming laws. I said, well, so they called the gaming people in New Jersey. They wouldn't make an exception. Well, I wasn't going to play the roulette wheel with 2 zeros, although I felt like I could beat it, but I wasn't going to play it with 2 zeros because I didn't want to wake people up that I could beat a roulette wheel with 2 zeros. So I go back over to the bar and I sit down, and this was when I was drinking, and I started drinking Corona beer. Well, I drank a case of Corona beer. I got shit-faced drunk. I went back over to the blackjack table and I started playing blackjack, and I lost the entire $1 million.
Wow.
Well, I got on a plane the next day. You can imagine the sermon I gave myself on the way back to Las Vegas. But anyway, I get back to Las Vegas. So a couple of days later, Steve's called me, hey, let's play golf. I said, okay. So we go play golf, and we're playing poker, the Golden Nugget. And a couple of weeks later, he says, why don't we go back up? Said, they're going to have the U.S. Open at Shinnecock. And said, we can take the helicopter over to the golf tournament. I said, Steve, I can't play any roulette wheel in Atlantic City with 2 zeros. I'm not going to do that. He said, well, I figured out how we can do it. He said, we'll keep track of the amount of time you play. Whatever the per is, a percentage that means, I'll give you your half of it back. And he said, that's the equivalent of 1 zero. I said, well, that's good enough for me. So this time I went up, I put up $2 million. And I could bet 2,000 to a number. The first day I won $3.2 million. And back in those days, they closed the casinos in Las Vegas, in Atlantic City at 4 o'clock in the morning. And they didn't reopen them until the next morning. So I played at 4 o'clock. I'm 3.2 million winner. They closed the casino. I think I'm going to go to Shinnecock the next day with Steve to watch the U.S. Open. Well, I get up, Steve's already gone. He left me there. I'm sure he thought, well, I lose the money back. So I go back down there, and the roulette wheel's still there. And I started playing again. And although I won, I wasn't nearly as effective the second day as I was the first day. But I probably played about 8, 9 hours, and I'm 600,000 winner for that day. And the place is just covered up. I got people looking up underneath this roulette wheel. They're looking at everything. Some guy comes over and sits down next to me. He's the head of the gaming control in New Jersey. And of course, there wasn't anything wrong with the roulette wheel. They could have put a gun to my head. I didn't do anything to the roulette wheel. But anyway, so it gets about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I put up 2 million. I won 3.8 million. So I decided, well, maybe it's time to go on home. So they wrote me a check for 5.8 million. I got on a plane, flew back home. And then from that moment forward, Steve Wynn and I have had a strained relationship. Let's put it that way. It was fine when I lost $1 million up there to him playing blackjack. It was fine when I lost a $500,000 in the Golden Nugget months earlier playing baccarat or blackjack when I was drunk. But when I won the 3.8 million playing roulette, he's never forgiven me for that. He sent that wheel to the manufacturer, Paul and Son, who had bought it from him. And they told him there was nothing wrong with the wheel. It was perfectly fine. I was also told by people who worked there that he sent the wheel to NASA. He had them to cut it up to see if there was something wrong with it. There wasn't anything wrong with it. And so that's my story with myself and brother Steve Wynn.
So you've completely given up casino games other than poker and sports betting. This happened a while back too. Why?
I won a Super Bowl of poker in 1986, and back in those days, poker rooms were filled with smoke. A lot of people was doing drugs, and I've never done drugs in my life, and I quit smoking. So, and there's nothing worse than the next anything. So I couldn't stand to be around smoke. Didn't want to be around the drugs. So I quit everything except sports betting, and I started a company at the time called Berkeley Enterprises, which is Susan's middle name, which is now the Walters Group. And we started buying non-performing assets on the RTC in the late 80s. I bought my first golf course in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was buying apartments, shopping centers, condominiums. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, you had a meltdown with savings and loan associations in the United States. And in California, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, you had a lot of property that these S&Ls, when they went under, they had to dispose of the assets. So I started buying a lot of these assets, and I didn't have a huge bankroll at the time. So I would buy the assets and I would improve them and sell them to someone else pretty quick, take a small profit and reinvest the money. And but I was still doing sports. Back in those days, I was doing sports 365 days a year. I was betting on baseball, basketball, golf, hockey, tennis, college basketball, NBA. I was betting college football, pro football, doing all of the halves, first half, second halves. And so I was doing that along with, buying the assets. And then when I got in the golf business, I had golf courses and I bought the first one in New Mexico. I had one in Arizona. I had three in Chicago. And then I eventually had seven in Las Vegas. Out of seven that we had, we built we built three from scratch. And we took three others and we rebuilt them, which was more difficult than building from scratch. So we had seven golf courses in Las Vegas at one time. And then I was doing sports and then and I stayed busy.
Yeah, the golf aspect of this story is, I think, an underrated one. One, you've been playing golf for 4 decades now, betting on golf, but also learning how to get better at the game. And you've had a bunch of really good teachers help you with that throughout that time. What is your favorite golf tip?
Oh, my favorite golf tip is, keep it simple. I mean, I think most any teacher will probably tell you, whether it's a touring pro or whether it's an amateur, 99% of the time a player has a problem. It's in his, we'll call it setup. Setup being his alignment, his grip, and that's typically where 99% of your problem is: your posture, your setup, and the way you grip the golf club. I played golf for a lot of years and never took a lesson. It was just real simple. It was natural. When I started taking lessons, before I knew it, I got so confused. I'm standing over a golf ball, I can't pull the club back. And then finally I realized I'd taken a few too many of the pills out of the bottle. I need to put some back, make this thing a little simpler. It just shows you what my lack of talent is. You're right. I work with the best teachers in the entire world, and I'm an okay player, but I'm not a great player.
Still betting tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the course at times, though.
No, not really. I haven't done that for a long time.
Okay. Okay.
No, no. For a period of time in my life, golf was a huge part of the way I made a living.
Yeah.
And but when I quit poker and quit all the other stuff, other than sports betting. I continue to play golf, but there's been a few times maybe since then I played, some real high rounds of golf. Doyle and I got a good friend of mine in Florida. His name is Dewey Tomko, and they put a deal together. It was televised actually on ESPN. It was a 9-hole, three-man scramble. We played for $1 million a hole. Somehow, I don't know, Dewey and Doyle got on the same team. And then the second day, we had a deal where it was two-man teams and we played for $200,000. And outside of that, I really haven't had what I would call any big golf games since the late 80s. So I play golf today, and a lot of guys I play with, we don't play for anything. I mean, I never ask anybody to play for anything because of who I am. But most of the guys will play for anywhere from $5 to $20 Nassau. Some guys want to play for 100 or 200 or 500, but that's very rare. And but sometimes I'll just go out with a caddy and practice all day. I love playing golf, man. It's if I never bet another nickel on golf, I could play golf. I don't. I guess I've gambled so high in my life, betting a few bucks on something is it. I don't know. I probably don't get the buzz out of it I used to. And frankly, if I'm playing somebody, I'm gonna try to beat their brains out whether they're playing for nothing or not, money or not.
Understandable. And it's also really cool. I think that everybody should have at least one personal sports highlight where you're actually on that field of play and you get to feel what it's like to be a champion. Your moment came on the golf course, winning the 2008 Pebble Beach Pro-Am. That was what a cool moment that had to have been for you to come out victorious there.
It was, I played in a lot of pro-ams. I played in a lot of member guest tournaments. This tournament was so appealing to me because everyone who goes to this tournament, I mean, man, they're grinding. They're really trying hard. And it's not a tournament that, some guys go, I mean, they really watch the handicaps there. They have a marshal that follows you around on every hole. It's a well ran tournament, and it's a very competitive tournament from an amateur standpoint. So that's why it was so appealing to me. Ironically, the year I won it, I almost didn't go. I've been doing sports the entire fall, and I hadn't hit a golf ball. And when I quit, when sports season started, I had developed, man, I don't know why. It's never happened to me before in my life, but I wasn't putting well, and putting is like the strongest part of my game. And then just before we were supposed to go to Pebble Beach, I got the flu. So I started to pull out, and Susan said, no, I said, you'll feel better. So I go up there. I haven't hit a ball, and I'm still not 100%. Well, I went up the putting green, and I'm still not putting well. There's a guy up there. If you go to any of the pro tournaments, you'll see different manufacturers up there. They've got their putters out for the players to try and the amateurs to try. So I go up there, and it's the first time I saw the big grip on the putter. Yeah, KJ Choi at the time used a putter grip, and it was made by a company called Superstroke. So I go up there, and the guy lets me hit a few putts with it. Well, man, I'm making everything that I'm standing over this putter. So I said, look, I'd like for you to put one of these grips on my putter. He said, oh, we can't do that. This is the only one we got. At the time I had 7 golf courses, so we were buying a lot of equipment. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. How many putter grips would I have to buy in order for you to put one on my putter? Well, I can't do it. I can't do it. So we called his boss anyway. They relented and they give me a putter grip. They put it on my putter. And I know what happened now. That big grip on that putter, it took my hands out of the putter and it forced me to putt, with my big muscles in my shoulders, which that's what I've always done. That week at Pebble Beach, I don't know if you've ever played any golf at Pebble Beach, but the greens are very small and they're pretty treacherous. I never had one 3-putt and the entire week at Pebble Beach. No, didn't have one. I mean, I putted so good it was unbelievable.
Wow.
And the best score I shot was like 83, 84, or whatever it was. But I'm playing from white tees at Pebble Beach and the other golf courses, which gave me a huge advantage because, we've talked about this before, golf courses I play, wherever I play the tips, even at my age, or I play the setback. I play a long golf course. So I play the ball down, and I play by the rules of golf. I don't roll the ball. I don't do those. So my handicap it was based upon that. Well, they put me in a golf tournament and they moved me up to the white tees. I mean, it's like you got a huge advantage over some guy who plays there every day. So although I wasn't playing well, I was hitting the ball most white tees. Well, heck, I'm hitting wedges in almost every green. And although I dubbed a lot of wedges and I didn't hit them too good, but the guy that I played with, I got to tell you this one last story. His name is Freddie Jakobson. Funny dude. I liked him a lot, and we had so much fun together. But he's the streakiest pro I've ever played with in my life. That week, he had 16 birdies. He had two eagles. One day at Pebble Beach, he birdied 7 holes in a row. Now, that year, there were two guys that went into a playoff, Vijay Singh and Lowry. They were 9 under par for the tournament. Freddie was 20 under. He had 16 birdies and two eagles, and he finished the tournament about 2 or 3 under par. So any other tournament, you look at any pro player that wins a tournament, at the very most they have maybe is 1 or 2 bogeys. This guy, this guy had 16 birdies and two eagles, and he finished 6 shots behind the lead. But every hole it seemed like he was out of, I would either part getting a shot, or I birdied actually a couple of them getting a shot, and that's how we won the tournament. But as you can imagine, a professional gambler from Las Vegas, I mean, when we won the tournament, and we won the tournament by like 10 shots. I mean, boy, they were doing some howling. I mean, it was like, oh my God, it has to be a sandbagger. Well, the Pebble Beach's credit, they came out and said they were totally happy or satisfied with my handicap. They'd had a marshal follow us around. They knew how the scores were shot. And as a matter of fact, they invited me back another year to play, which, there's history at Pebble Beach. There's guys up there who they feel like have been sandbaggers who won. I won't name anyone, but they never ever get invited back. Now I got invited back, but they gave me a guy. On a good day, I might have been able to beat him myself. Anyway, I think we finished last in the tournament, but I did get invited back, which I really appreciated.
Now, the story of how you eventually came to be found guilty of insider trading in 2017 is just a wild story. There's quite honestly too much for us to go over at all in this conversation right now, but it essentially began with a 2011 interview with 60 Minutes, where at the end of this interview, that was a comparative piece on risk taking that included sports betting, you mentioned about getting hustled by Wall Street shortly after you become the target of an investigation by the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York for suspicious trading. Now, the initial investigation did not turn into anything, but they just kept at it. And ultimately, there was a lot of shenanigans and quite possibly some illegal things happening that led to you getting convicted of insider trading and having to spend 31 months in a federal prison. Now, as you talk about in the book, and as you probably talked about way too often in the interviews that you've done for this book, if Phil Mickelson, your former friend and betting partner, would have taken the stand and simply told the truth about things, and boy, what a colossal piece of shit that guy is, you probably avoid jail time altogether. But I'm not going to ask you about that, Billy, because you've talked about that entirely too much. What I do want to ask you about, though, is that in retrospect, you feel like you would have been found innocent if you had just taken the stand in trial. So why did you choose not to take the stand, and how do you think that would have changed things ultimately?
Well, knowing what I know now, I think that was really the only chance I had of being not going to prison. As you noted, the jury, there were three main things that the jury never knew before they went back. Actually, four. Three main things the jury never knew before they went back to decide, my fate. The guy who was in charge of the white collar crime unit in New York City, David Chavez for the FBI, who investigated me for 3.5 years, who brought his work. He's 100% of the reason that I got indicted, him and the Southern District of New York, and working with him. They didn't know that he had been caught violating the law. They didn't know he'd been suspended from the FBI in my case. They didn't know that the judge was residing in the courtroom had recommended he be indicted for two criminal felonies. They didn't know that. They didn't know that the FBI had 60 days of wiretaps on me and didn't play a one for them. They didn't know any of that. And they didn't know that Phil Mickelson, who they read about in the paper that was going to be in court, who they read about earlier, they didn't know that Phil Mickelson had given 2 previous interviews to the FBI and had told them emphatically that I did not give him any inside information. Those were the 3 main things that they did not know when they went back to decide my guilt or innocence. What I underestimated and seriously underestimated was the amount of resentment that jury had for me because I owned a private airplane. I had multiple homes. I'm a gambler from Las Vegas. I didn't know that. I guess you talking about not being naive and stupid. I guess I was. I guess I should have known that. My attorneys, there was one witness against me. And this was a guy that I'd known for almost 50, well, I'd known him 15 years at the time. My attorneys had caught him in at least 25 lies. There was nobody in the courtroom that believed this man, and he didn't have any credibility with anyone. I mean, so my attorneys were convinced that if the jury couldn't believe this guy, he was the only witness, there was no way they could convict me. And I was there in the courtroom every day. I saw it, and there's no question that this man had no credibility. The 31 months I was in prison, when I look back at this, and I'd say, well, what would I do differently if I had a chance to do it? I had to testify, because if I'd have testified, the jury would have known who I was. They would have known my background. They would have also known when we talked about this stock, when I bought it and when I sold it and why I bought it and why I sold it. I could have explained what took place and they could have understood it. I didn't do that because we've been there 3.5 weeks. The judge had stopped the trial at least 15 times to wake the jury up. They were sleeping. That one guy on the jury had already said he's leaving next Monday. He has to go on a business trip. Well, when we were deciding what to do with this, the attorney said, look, we've been here 3.5 weeks. These people are blinded looking at charts, which they don't understand. And Tom Davis, the witness, no one believes him. He's got no credibility. And these people want to get out of here. We were kind of in the winter months in New York. And we believe if they can't believe him, they can't convict you. We had 23 witnesses set to testify, including me. And it was my decision. And the bottom line was, I said, okay, well, I agree with you. They can't believe me. So we put on 5 witnesses. I think we put on a pilot, we put on a controller from our company, and 3 stockbrokers I did business with. And wrapped the case up. And like I said, Monday morning quarterbacking, we all know what that is. You bet on, you make a decision, you look back at it and you say, well, what could I have done differently to got a different outcome? Well, I know what I would have had to have done differently. I would have had to have testified, because during the entire trial, those prosecutors kept reminding that jury about my multiple homes, my private plane, me giving my celebrity friends inside information, which they knew wasn't a lie, because the guy they were referring to was Phil Mickelson. They wouldn't call him to testify because they knew what he was going to say. I tried to call him, which he said he would come. And in the 11th hour, his lawyer said, no, he's not going to. If you call him, he's going to take the 5th Amendment. Well, if someone tells you that they're going to take the 5th Amendment, you cannot call them. Okay, so they leaked all these stories months earlier and implicated Phil Mickelson. Okay, he's a famous guy. It's in all these newspapers. So when we were impaneling a jury up there and we were asking them questions of prospective jurors, we had 2 or 3 people say, was Phil Mickelson going to testify in this trial? Well, everyone in New York was waiting on Phil Mickelson to come in and testify. Well, Phil Mickelson, he don't ever show up to testify. Okay, so you got one witness against me. You got a guy we caught 25 times lying, who nobody believed. And if Phil Mickelson had testified, I am sure as I'm looking at you, Trey, I wouldn't have gone to prison because if he'd have walked in there and simply said what he told the FBI, I did not give him inside information, that jury's going to go out. They got Phil Mickelson, who's a guy they know, and they got this guy they brought over 25 times lying, amongst a number of other things that were reprehensible. So I would have never got convicted. On the other hand, knowing what I know now, I for sure should have testified.
So you did spend 31 months locked up in federal prison camp, Pensacola, in the Florida Panhandle. How was prison a lot like betting sports?
No one's ever asked me that question, so I don't know. I walked into federal prison camp, and the I thought I knew what freedom was until I got there, and I lost all of it. I stayed in an 18 by 22 room with 9 other men with bunk beds, and the walls had black mold all over them. And the building was a concrete building, was built in the 60s. It had no heat in it whatsoever, none. The chillers ran 24/7. So in the wintertime, you almost froze to death. So how I compare to sports betting? Well, you got to have a lot of discipline. There's no question about that. And you got to have a game plan, which I had a game plan. My game plan was to stay as busy as I could stay. And I did. I was the only guy out of 600 guys there. I was the only guy that had 2 jobs. And I worked at a laundry and I worked at the naval base. And I mentored a couple dozen men. And then on weekends, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, I was there on visits with people who either worked for me or friends who came to see me. But I had a very precise schedule.
We're going to end with this, Billy. You spend 2 chapters of this book sharing your secrets on becoming insanely successful at sports betting. Not everybody would do something like this. So why did you choose to do so?
10 years ago, Trey, I wouldn't have sold this information for $20 million. But I'm 77 years old. It's my legacy. The majority of states in the United States now have legalized sports betting. And I remember when I began betting sports, I shared it all in the book. You know, I got addicted. I lost money I shouldn't have lost. I got myself in financial problems. I made all kinds of mistakes. And I wanted to share that. I mean, I wanted people to read that because that's what can happen to you. If you're going to bet on sports and you're going to do it as a recreation, you set aside X number of dollars and say, I'm going to lose this money and you're going to have some fun, great. But if you're going to get involved with sports betting and think you're going to get rich quick, or you're going to get rich, period, and I can already tell you what's going to happen. You're going to bet, you get loser, you're going to get even, you bet money that you don't have, and then you keep telling yourself this story. Well, when I get even, I'm going to quit. The problem is you never get even, or if you do get even, you're even more emboldened. Now you think you can win, and then you're off on this trail, and it's a dead end street, I can tell you. So I'm concerned that of all these millions of people that have started betting, that they could run in and have some of the same issues that I had as a young man. So I want to share that with them. The other thing that I put in here, the proprietary information, is I wrote 2 chapters. I wrote one for basic strategy for betting. And if people just follow that, they're probably still going to lose. They probably got maybe 2% the worst of it. But I mean, hypothetically, I guess they could win, but you got a chance to win. But you got to follow the basic betting strategy to the T, which is easy to do, anyone can do. And that is when to bet and what numbers to buy half points on, what numbers not to buy half points on, how much to pay for half points. I put all the charts in there that show you exactly what the fair price is to pay for a half point. I put all the charts in there that show you how a spread, 11 to 10 spread compares to a money line, so you can see which one's the best deal. And I put all the true odds in there on parlays and teasers. Most people, I think, that bet sports are under the assumption that all the bets you make are 11 to 10. You're risking 110 to win 1. Well, in parlays and teasers, that's not true. A lot of parlays and teasers, you're laying $1.30, $1.35. You got no chance. I mean, no chance to win. So the basic betting strategy is going to educate you on the main things that you need to understand to bet sports. For people who think maybe they want to be a professional handicapper or a professional bettor, I've added a masterclass section of that. And believe it or not, Trey, it took me 6 months to write that to get it down to where hopefully people can follow it. It's fairly complicated, but I think we have it now where most people could probably follow it. And that's exactly what I do. It's exactly how I do it. And when I wrote the book, I can tell you that is 100% up to date at the end of last Super Bowl. Okay. So there's nothing that I know about sports that isn't in there. All the various factors that involve games, travel time, weather, surfaces, I've included all those in there along with the value of those. The home field advantages, I put all that stuff in there. So anyone can go in there, they can follow that. And if you're if you're betting sports, it's undoubtedly going to give you the only chance in the world that you've got to win. If you've got one bookmaker and you're signed up with some guy that paid you something to sign up with him, and you're not looking at lines from any place else, you have zero chance to win. Zero. Don't forget that. You got zero. Now you may win one bet, but I mean, or you may win 10 bets, but over a long period of time, you have zero chance to win. In order to bet sports, you've got to get the right numbers, and you got to pay a fair price for things. If you overpay for it, you got no chance. So that 11 to 10 that you think you're laying, if you go out and you lay a bad number, you're not laying 11 to 10. You're laying $1.20 or you're laying $1.30. You're only getting 11 to 10 if you go out and you get the right numbers. And I put a strategy in there that allows, I can pretty much tell you 9 times out of 10 on a Monday where the line's going to go to on a Saturday. And I've shared that all that with you, those strategies in there. And why you should bet on certain games early and why you should wait on certain games to bet late. All that's in the book. So I think it'll be very helpful. And it's a long-winded answer to your question, Trey. But like I said, I'm 77. I'm not going to live forever. It's my legacy. Now, since last season was over until this season began, these teams, they've traded players. You got a lot of new players. You got a lot of new coaches. So you have to make those changes from the end of last season to the beginning of this season. And then every week, you got players that are playing injured or you got players that are out and there's a backup that's taking their place. Well, I tell you in the book how to value all the different players. And I tell you the adjustments to make when a player's out and when a sub's in, how to adjust your line. It's all in there. And honestly, Trey, this is a dream come true for me because, you talked about this earlier. Stop and think about it. In 1990, the FBI came to my home in Las Vegas, arrested me and my wife, Susan. They put leg irons on her, handcuffs on me, took us out in front of our neighbors, and arrested us for betting on sports in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, today, the majority of the states in the United States, you got legalized sports betting. So this is my dream come true. I'm glad and I can see a lot of positives that can come out of this, but I can also see a lot of negatives that could potentially come out of this. Now, the industry, they've got a responsibility instead of just some lip service to try to find people that are dealing with addiction problems. And then the NCAA and the NFL, they've got a real responsibility. And I'm not talking about one meeting. They need to meet with these young men on a continual basis. And they got to point out to them how important it is that they don't bet on these games or any other games and why it's important, how it affects their team, their teammates, how it affects their career. And they've got to, because let's face it, these are kids. I mean, or they're very, very young men at all. And they're very competitive. They want to bet on themselves. But what they don't realize is that one little bet can destroy their entire career, or it can send out the wrong message. So the NFL, the NCAA, we're going to have betting. I think that's great. But we've got to get in front of these people on a regular basis, and we got to remind them over and over and over The good news is you got more transparency now with sports betting than we've ever had because everybody bets. They have an account. They got all your personal information. All that stuff's there. That's good. But the NC2A, these colleges, and the NFL, and all the professional leagues, NBA, everyone, they got a responsibility to sit down with these players and point out to them, it'll destroy their career. And it'll not only destroy their career, what it'll do to their team and their teammates.
Yeah, it feels like a whole lot of posturing by the sports leagues right now, if I'm being completely honest. And I'm with you. I think that legalizing sports gambling was an obvious step versus demonizing it and pushing things into the underbelly of society. But we're also at a weird time because it's as easy as making a sports bet as just punching a couple of spots on the screen of your cell phone in order to do so in a lot of states. So it's tricky. And the responsibility is, of course, it's on the individual, but it is also on these sports leagues that stand to make millions, if not billions of dollars on the partnerships that they have with these sports betting entities too.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. By the way, we could have spent half the time, if not the entire time, on those two chapters. Thank you for sharing that. Perhaps at some point in the near future, we can actually focus specifically on those couple of chapters. But I felt like it was important to allow you to tell your story first and foremost. And I do want to end with this, Billy, because we cannot understate the philanthropic side of you and your wife and everything that you try and do in giving back to the community, things like Opportunity Village, but your focus now, based on your time spent in prison, also has to do with prison reform. How are you going about trying to make things better inside prisons in the not too distant future?
Well, when I was in prison, I mentored a couple dozen men. I had visited people in prison before, although I had hired people out of prison. I really didn't understand the impact that prison was having on some people's lives. These 2 dozen men that I mentored, some of them have been in prison 20, 25 years. They didn't even know how to use a cell phone. They had no job skill sets whatsoever. The entire time they were in prison, the only thing they learned how to do was be a better criminal. They were going home. They had no job skill set at all. And the closer they would get to the door being their release, the more time I would spend with them on one-on-one. And a lot of these guys would break down. They would start crying. Not one of those people wanted to go back to prison, but almost every one of them felt like they were probably going to go back to prison because they had no way to make a living and to support their families. So when I got out of prison, I went to see Senator Harry Reid, who was a friend of mine. I wanted to put vocational schools in the federal prisons and offered to put up the first $2 million. And Senator Reid was working with the Biden administration, and unfortunately, Senator Reid, he passed away. And when he passed away, the former sheriff of Clark County, his name is Bill Young, he said, Billy, he said, probably the best reentry program in the United States is right here in Las Vegas. And he said, it's called Hope for Prisoners. He said, I'd like to introduce you to John Ponder, the guy that runs it. And I said, okay. So we got together. I got introduced to John Ponder and got involved with the organization and learned as much about it as I could. And we donated some money to them, and they were able to put some things in there that they needed from an educational standpoint, some computers and a lot of different things to be able to work with the people that were in the reentry program. Well, I still wanted to put vocational schools into the prisons because to me, that was the long-term answer instead of a Band-Aid. Now, this program in Las Vegas, it's the most successful program of its kind in the United States.
Wow.
It's an 18-month program. There's only a 7% recidivism rate. 7. And it's been in effect since 2012. So they had a graduation there. John invited me down once, so I go down to the first graduation. The graduation is held at Metropolitan Police Headquarters in Las Vegas. I went there. There were about 75 Metropolitan Police officers. The sheriff was there. The mayor was there. The district attorney was there. The head of corrections for the state of Nevada was there. And there were about 300 people there who are serving as mentors in Las Vegas. They were there. And there were 50 police officers that were there. They were serving as mentors to these people. And I saw the graduating class come out with caps and gowns on, and I couldn't believe my eyes. So I said, man, this is what we want to do. So I went to the governor and I said, we'd like to put vocational schools into Nevada prisons. The governor's a former sheriff, so he's familiar with Hope for Prisoners, and it was real simple. The Ingolstadt Foundation of Las Vegas, they agreed to put up $2 million. Susan and I put up $2 million. The state put up $1 million. And we put our first vocational schools into Nevada state prisons. They're going into Indian Springs prison. And the prisoners, the ones that qualify, this is a privilege. This isn't something just someone can walk into. And if they don't apply themselves 100%, they're out. And this is like a tough charter school. But they can get certified in being an electrician, a plumber, an air conditioning repair, welder, or truck driver. Okay. So I'm really excited about that. And to me, the bigger picture of that, when dad goes home and he goes home to those 3, 4, 5 children, okay, the children's father is no longer a career criminal. Okay. There's some kind of chance that those children may follow their father in his footsteps as being an electrician, a plumber, or whatever he is. Okay. Instead of a career criminal. So I think to me, that's a longer term. And that's a broader outlook on the impact that this is. I don't say could have, it's going to have. I'm confident of that. So luckily, we've got a proactive governor in Nevada who's committed to this, a proactive head of corrections. John Ponder has just done a magnificent job with Hope for Prisoners. And I got to tell you, I couldn't be prouder of Las Vegas and the community. I mean, everyone has gotten behind this. And I tell you what they do in this thing, Trey. Almost every one of the people today that go to prison, they have some issue with drugs. First thing they do is they get you right. They get you off of drugs. Second thing they do, they get you right with your family. Okay? That's reading it's an 18-month program. It doesn't happen overnight. And then they teach you, life skills, job skills. They teach you how to, budget your expenses. They teach you all types of things that you need to know to be able to navigate society. And then when the graduation's held, they have a job fair. Every one of those people that are coming out of those graduations have a job the day they graduate. Every one of them do. And that's the reason that program is working. But I knew when I left prison I had to do something, and I couldn't do anything about the housing. I couldn't do anything about the nutrition. I couldn't do anything about the medical care. But this is something I felt like I could do, and it's been great.
It's an incredible idea, and I think a win-win for everyone, not just the individuals most affected, but society on the whole, because we have a shortage of people who are able to work the trades right now. So it is a huge boost to that general population once they get out of prison and can reintroduce themselves to day-to-day life. He is Billy Walters. The new book is titled Gambler: Secrets from a Life at Risk. You can get it now wherever books are sold. Billy, thank you so much for the time today, and thank you for this entertaining and informative book. Really enjoyable read, and I really did enjoy the conversation today.
Likewise, Trey, I really enjoyed visiting with you and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thanks to Gentleman Jesus for the intro and outro music. Hear more of his work at gentlemanjesus.com. And thanks to you for hanging out. For more of the show and to connect on social media, visit booksonpod.com. We'll talk to you next time on Books on Pod.